Hello everyone, this is Garuka123, and this is my modding tutorial for adding a basic creature into ARK. This is a voiceover. This footage is going to be sped up and cut to the time constraints of the tutorial contest. So, first what we're going to do is we have a mod folder for our custom character in the mods folder. And with the folder open, we're going to import our character model and skeleton. So for this tutorial example, we're going to use my Dino character from the Dino mod. Just gotta find the right model that I'm going to use. Now in this window, we have a box for import mesh and for import skeletal. And since this is a custom creature, we're not going to plug in a skeleton. We're going to use our own and import that. If you were going to make a character from a pre-existing one, then you would plug a skeleton in there for reference. And then we're going to leave all of these default import animations. We don't need checked right now, but when we start importing those, if your character has custom animations, we would want this checked. So now with our character imported, we're going to see a mesh, which is listed as a skeletal mesh. If you have animation checked, you'll see an animation sequence. You can delete that for now, since it's not actually an animation. We'll see a physics asset and a skeleton item. So for this character, the imported model is very tiny. So what we're going to do is we're going to adjust the scale here. So if we open the model and go to this scale multiplier, we can adjust the actual displayed scale of the mesh. And this is what you want to do to adjust the actual size of your character. And this won't interfere with the animations or anything. So this is the suggested way to do it, in my opinion. So you'll also notice if your character is very small, the camera may be very zoomed out of your character. So we're going to, for some reason this has to do with the physics asset. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our physics asset item, and you'll see the mesh is very small and the joints are very large. So we're going to highlight the bold joints in that hierarchy. And then once we have all of the bold joints highlighted, we're going to change to scale. We're going to grab the white box with hold left click, and we're going to scale them all down so that those capsules fit within the character's body. So that looks good. So once we adjust that, we'll save, and then you'll see when you preview your character, it should fit itself to the window pretty well. Now we're going to do our materials for our character. The materials managed in the LOD window and the mesh. So we're going to import our textures for our character. So in our texture window, I have a lot of files because I already have this mod uploaded. But so we're going to take this Dino colorized texture. We're going to take the really funky colored colorize, the specular, entry icon, and the normal map. This will take a minute, so I'm going to skip ahead. So now with our textures imported, for the sake of organization, we're going to make a folder called texture, and we're going to move the texture assets into this folder. So now with our textures all established, we're going to right click, and you'll see there's an option for material. We're not going to use that. If we go down more, you'll see there's materials and textures. Hover over that and you'll see there's an item called material instance, which is what we want. And we'll call this croc_mat_inst. And I think just about every asset in ARK uses material instances. So now when we open the material instance, you'll see there is some options on the side, and there's a window with a textureless sphere. So what we can do here is we want to see the actual material on our character. So we're going to go back to our main folder. We're going to select our skeletal mesh, just have it highlighted. And back in the material instance window, you'll see on the top right side, there's a few options, and there's one that looks like a teapot. And when you click that, it's going to use the selected skeletal mesh in the content browser for the display. So now for our material instance, we're going to use most of the settings from the basic Dino material. So if we hit the drop down and we type in mm_dino, you'll see there's an option for Dino no metallic colorize, and that's the one we want. So we'll plug that in. You'll see our character is going to get really bizarrely colored. This is good for now. This is what we want. You'll see there's a default albedo map, is what it's called. And then this is where our main texture is going to go. So for colorizing our character, which is the random colors appearing, you want your texture map to be more or less grayscale. And this makes it easier for the random colors to appear. So with the asset selected, we're going to hit the arrow on albedo map, and that'll plug that in, and you'll see the scales and texture will actually appear in the croc. And to edit the values in this window, you have to check the boxes on the left side. So now we're going to tamper with the colorization. So if I were to check red and then change the red, it's going to change the red value on that map to whatever I designate. So with colorization checked, we're going to select our colorize map, and then we're going to plug that in there. And you'll see then the colors kind of change. And then we just change the colors based on the map. So if we want the red areas a certain color, we want the yellow areas a certain color, if we want the cyan areas a certain color, and so on and so forth. So we're just going to make kind of a basic brown, natural colored crocodile. So these colors aren't going to actually be what's displayed on your character. This is just for sake of reference. So now we're on normal maps. Normal maps are the maps that tell the model where light is bending around the character and the depth, more or less. So we're going to check both of these normal maps. There's a tiled normal map and there's a regular normal map. And we want to plug in our normal map into that bottom one. So then you'll see the scales are a little more defined on our character. Then you'll notice if we zoom in, you'll see the other tiled texture bumps, which is that tiled normal map. And we can adjust values on this. We can adjust the size of these tiles, the strength of them. So that's all up to you. So we're going to mostly leave these tile normal map settings default. You don't need to mess with these much for this tutorial. So now we're going to go to specular map, and the specular is the shininess or the wetness of your character, how that appears. So normally specular maps are grayscale. They'll be on values of black and white. For some reason, most of ARK's specular maps are on a magenta sort of scale, and I cannot explain to you why, but they seem to work better that way. So if you use a image editing software like Photoshop or GIMP, you can change your speculars to that if you would like. Regular grayscale speculars still work, but in my experience, the purple ones work better. So with all of those plugged in, we'll go back to our skeletal mesh. We're going to highlight our material instance and then plug that in. And then you'll see it'll show up on our character in the preview window. And now we have our nice textured character. And then we're going to save all. So now with our model and textures done, we can start importing animations. So I have made all the animations for this character. There are several animations, so I'm going to just highlight all of these and import them. If your character has custom animations, this is what you would do. If you are editing a pre-existing ARK dinosaur, you do not need to do this. You can just use the animations and skeletons. So now when a window will pop up, we want it to reference our character skeleton for the animation, so we're gonna put a Dinosuka skeleton in here, and that will link the animations to that skeleton specifically. And we'll leave all the other settings default. So now with all our animations open, we can open our mesh and then go to that last tab on the right for animations, and we'll see on the bottom window all our animations will be there. And then if we double click any of them, it will preview them in the window. So now you'll see on the top of my animation list we have a lot of aim animations. Now what those are the basically the directions the head faces when the camera turns or when the character is looking at your survivor. So we need to edit these so that they all work properly in an aim offset. So now what we want to do is go back to our window, right click, go to animation, and select aim offset. And then a window will pop up asking for the skeleton we want to use. We want to use our Dinosuchus in this case. And then we're going to type in dino _ aim offset. Now opening this, you'll see there is a preview window of the T-pose for our character, and then at the bottom there is a grid. This grid is the coordinates for where that defines where the head is facing at what values. So now I'm going to go back to the window. I'm going to select my ground idle, and I'm going to plug that into this additive settings on the left side. What this does is this applies the aim offset as an additional animation on top of our base animation, which would be the idle. So now we're going to go to our additive settings for our aim. We're going to change the additive animation type to mesh space, and we are going to change the base pose type to animation selected animation frame. So now with all those done, we're going to go back to our aim offset, and we're going to start drag and dropping these directions into the grid. And you'll notice at first it's going to really distort the model, so we have a weird snail crocodile right now. Just ignore that. We're going to keep plugging them in, so aim down, aim up, and then once we start popping in ones on each side, then the mesh fixes itself. So now with all those plugged in, you'll see our character's head is moving based on the coordinates. So we have some nice head bobbing. Croc is looking up, looking to the right. Nice head bobbing crocodile. So now we want to make the animation blueprint for our character. So this is the blueprint that will define all of the movement, the idle, the swimming, flying, what have you, for our character. So for the sake of this tutorial, we are going to parent our animation blueprint to the Sarcos. Normally, I would make these animation blueprints myself just to be thorough, but for a basic new creature, you can parent it to a similar creature's animation blueprint. So we're going to select Sarco animation blueprint on the top, and then Croc skeleton on the bottom. Going to hit select, and then we're going to name it Croc _ anim BP. Now with this open, you'll see there's a big graph in the middle, and a really screwed up looking Croc on the left with some values below it. Now, before I continue, you'll see in the graph there's a red and green node. Delete those. I don't do it here, and it screws me up a little later, but you want those deleted so that you can edit some of the values in this graph. So with that done, you'll see on the left side there is a tab for Asset Override Editor. You want to open that and then drop down Anim Graph. And now since this is parented to the Sarco animation blueprint, you'll see there is Sarco ground idle, ground move forward, for everything for the Sarco. So what we're going to do is we're going to plug in our character's animations into these spots. So we'll highlight our ground idle for our character, go back to the blueprint, hit the arrow, and we'll plug it into that spot. And we're going to do that for all of these. And then if you hit the eyeball on the left side of these, it'll bring up the actual animation graph, which shows where those animations are plugged in on the original character. And then I'm going to speed this part up. It's just selecting and then plugging in for all of these. It's pretty simple. And then once we do that, we're going to go to the top left and hit that strict compile button. It should have an orange question mark, which means there's changes. And then we should get a check mark. If we get an X, then it means you have errors, and those will be displayed in that bottom window. Now if we go to the other tab for Anim Blueprint Editor, we can see all the values and variables that have this animation blueprint run properly. So for example, we see the top there is an isMoving boolean. So if we check that, you'll see our character will start walking, and that means the animation is plugged in correctly. And you can change these values, like you can change the playback speed of the walk animation or the sprinting animation. These are all values you can change. So now with that done, we're going to make our character's blueprint. So this is the NPC's blueprint. So we're going to right click in our main window. So I normally make the character blueprint from scratch as well. So if we type in Dino, you'll see, and scroll down, you'll see there is a Dino character BP. So if you want to make a character and all of its values from scratch, you would use this. But that's very complicated and time consuming. So for the tutorial, we're going to use the Sarco as our parent character. So if you search Sarco, you'll see a Sarco _ character BP. We're going to select that and open. And now the name for our blueprint would be the same as what we want to type in when we spawn our character. So for this, we're going to type in Croc _ character _ BP. And this is following the same naming scheme as every other NPC in ARK. So I should have done this earlier, but when we set up the primal game data for our mod, that needs to be in its own in the root folder. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make an animations folder, and we're going to put all of our animations in there. And then we're going to make a dinos folder, and we're going to put the rest of the items in there. So the animation folder, our character skeletal mesh, everything. So then with that, you should only see a dinos folder inside of your mods folder. So now we're going to right click, make a new blueprint, and we're going to search primal game. And then we're going to use the primal game data, and we're going to name this primal game data underscore croc for our croc mod, our croc character. And then we also want to make a test game mode blueprint. So we're going to do the same thing, right click, new blueprint, and we're going to search test game. We're going to use that test game data blueprint. And then we don't have to edit this one. Now once we do that, we can start editing our character's blueprint. So with that open, you're going to see there's animation blueprint generated class. We're going to plug our Croc's animation BP in there. And then you'll see there's a skeletal mesh option, and we're going to plug in our character's mesh in there. So before I continue here, I'm going to add two very important things to the skeleton of our character. So I'm going to add a rider socket, which is where the character rides the creature, and a melee socket, which is where the actual hitbox spawns during attacks. So I'm going to select my chest joint for this character. I'm going to right click, add socket, and I'm going to name it rider socket. And this will be where the character, where our survivor, our player character, is placed when we mount our creature. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the melee socket. So I'm going to hit the jaw, because that's where our character bites. And I'm going to right click, add socket, and name this melee socket. And then this will be where the actual hitbox spawns when our character does an attack. And we can adjust the positioning of these. So now back in our character BP, we can leave most of these settings default. So here we have Dino settings class. This is what it eats, what type of food it takes to tame. You can leave that default since it's just going to be the same as Sarco. Targeting team override is what kind of dinosaurs it will go after in a wild, if it's a carnivore, if they're too big or too small. Dino name tag is important. This is the tag that all the other assets in the game will reference. So we're going to just name this Croc. So now in the AI tab, we're going to start seeing the attacks. So you see in this section, all the animations are called montages. So we need to make special types of animations for these called animation montages. So for animations that will use them, such as our attacks or our torpor animations or our eating, we're going to right click those animations, go to create, and we're going to create anim montage. Now with our animation montages open, we're going to do the same thing as the aim offset. We're going to highlight our base animation, which is our idle, plug that into the additive settings. So now what we do is on the montage group option, you'll see a little magnifying glass under a setting called default group. And we're going to open that. We're going to hit the option that says add slot, and we're going to create a additive slot and a full body slot. And what these two options are is additive slot will play the animation on top of whatever animation is currently playing. So if our character is walking, it will continue to play the walk and add the bite attack animation with it. And a full body slot will be just that. It plays the animation over the entire body, and it will overwrite whatever animation is playing. And the difference between these and aim offsets is we want local space for our additive settings. We do not want mesh space. So here we have the animations for sleeping, when it eats while sleeping, it wakes up. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to make montages for all of these, and we're going to plug them into those slots. So for some animations, like the tamed wake up and wild wake up, I don't have any, so we can just clear those. And then below that at the very bottom, we have the AI controller. So this is the actual AI for the character. So what it can chase, when it flees, and we'll just leave that default. So now if we continue through the blueprint, there'll be a character movement drop down, and this is the speed, of our character, basically. This is the walk speed, the flying speed, swim speed, and this is where you would adjust those values, but we'll leave these at default as well. So now with all that done, if you go to the top right, you'll see there is defaults, components, and a graph window. So we're going to go to components right now. And you'll see there is a large window on the right side previewing our character and some values on the left. So we're going to change our capsule size for our character so it fits within the mesh. And now we need to make a character status component for our character. So now we're going to right click blueprint and we're going to search characters. And then you'll see there'll be Dino character status components pop up. And these are the blueprints that define the health, the stamina, the carry weight, the actual stats of our character. So you can make these yourself as well if you use the base BP, or you can reference another character that will have similar stats. So for this tutorial, we're going to use the Sarcos. And then the naming scheme of this is important. So we're going to call this Dino character status underscore BP underscore croc, which is our character. Let's save. And then once we have that, you may have to close your character blueprint for it to appear. Then we'll open it again, go back to components. And then if we click the drop down add component, oh, and the capsule is where the character meets the ground. So we want that to, the bottom of that to be where the bottoms of our feet on our character meet. So once you do that, we go to add component, and you should see on the top our new character status component that we made, and then you just plug that in. And we're going to hit compile, and then that should be it with that. Now if we want to add sounds to our character, since we're using the Sarco character BP, footstep sound should already be plugged in. So we're going to go to our move animations, and on notifies, we're going to right click add notify, and you'll see there's an anim notify custom event, and we're going to select that. And then you'll see a little pop-up will show up, and we're going to rename that footstep. And this is pretty much a cue or marker for when the actual event occurs. So we want to place these whenever there is a footfall, whenever the character's feet meet the ground. So we're just going to right click copy, and we're going to paste these throughout the animation to where the actual feet meet. And then we're going to select all of these. We're going to select copy, and then we can just paste these in exactly the same spots in the turning animations. So right click, paste at original time. Then we're going to save all. So now we want to add an actual hitbox to our character, which we should have done earlier, but I forgot. So what we're going to do is go to the montage. We're going to scroll down to notifies, and we're going to right click, and we're going to go add notify state, and then add notify state custom. Then you're going to see there is a little bar that pops up. We can control the length of this bar, and this is basically the frames when the actual hit occurs and when damage is dealt. So we're going to sync this to when the actual bite occurs in the animation. And then we have to name this melee swing, and that'll be read by the character blueprint. And then we can also do notify or add notify sound. We'll just plug it in the Sarco attack bite sound, and we'll plug that in. And now there's a sound that plays when the character tries to bite. And we can do that for other animations, or adding sounds for other animations. So now with that done, we're going to add a Dino Entry. So what this is the little floating HUD icon that is the illustration of our character. You don't need to do this, but it just looks nicer. Search entry, and you'll find some Dino Entry blueprints. and we'll just select the Sarcos as a parent. We're going to name it Dino Entry _ croc. We're going to open that, and there's a really basic blueprint. So we're going to change the tag to croc, and that'll look for the tag in our actual character blueprint, descriptor name croc. And then you'll see there's a material. So we need to make this material instance as well. So we'll just call this Dino Entry _ croc _ mat. And we'll open that. And we're going to parent the dropdown to a basic Dino Entry. So you see the raptor HUD icon will pop up. And then we're going to plug our illustration into the icon texture. So this is an illustration I did for the croc, and now that'll be plugged in there. So when we look at our character, we'll see that floating HUD icon. And then just plug that material into the entry blueprint. And now we have to open our primal game data, and we have to plug our character spawns into there and our Dino Entry. So now with this open, we're going to search Dino, and we're going to find an entries option. Scroll down and you'll see an additional Dino Entries. Hit the plus sign there, and then just plug in your Dino Entry blueprint into that slot. So then we want to add spawns for our character so that they will actually spawn naturally in game. So we're going to search spawn in the primal game data blueprint, and you'll see there is an NPC spawn entries container additions. So that is what we want. So we'll hit the plus sign there. So now for spawn entries container class, we're going to plug this in, let's say the rivers of the island. So we're going to open this, and we're going to search for inland water. So for these settings, I would recommend following the same parameters as a similar character. So we're going to hit the magnifying glass next to inland water, and that's going to take our content browser to where that blueprint is located. We're going to open that, and we're going to find the spawn parameters for the Sarco. And we're going to right-click that parameter, copy it, and then we're going to paste it into our own primal game data. So here's the Sarco one. So at the 1, we're going to copy. Or the 3, sorry. And our 0, we're going to set on top of that and hit paste. And then we just plug in our NPC there. So instead of the Sarco, we're going to replace that with our croc. Entry rate, going to leave default, and all of that. We're pretty much going to copy the Sarco settings here for our character spawns. Now the spawn should be done. And that's about it for creating a basic character in ARK. So now with that done, we're going to go to world settings on our right side of the window, and we're going to see there is a primal game data option. We're going to select our primal game data and plug that in there. And that's going to treat it as if it is the first mod in the load order. And then we can test our mod in the play window once we save all. Make sure everything's saved. So then once we have that, we can test play, and then we have our character so far with most of the settings default. And that's pretty much it for this tutorial. So yeah, that's about it. So thank you for watching, and happy modding.